All right. Oh, here's Cremina. Cremina is one of my clients, and she doesn't miss anything. She takes every workshop. She's on Clubhouse every Tuesday at noon Eastern. She's on it. She's like, I am raising money. And I love that. So welcome, everybody. Tonight, I am teaching Fundraising 101. It looks as if we're a very small group. I would love it if you would come on camera, so I don't feel as though it's just me talking, but at least there's Emily. So for those of you who don't know me, Carlton, I think we've recently met, and Amber. My name is Joanne Butcher, and I am a business coach for filmmakers, and I teach fundraising. That's everything that I do is through the lens of money, and I end up becoming the voice in my client's head that says, well, that sounds good, where's the money? Well, that sounds great, where's the money? So I'm a producer through and through, and I'm a fundraiser through and through. And so what I think most of us know as filmmakers is that, if we were interested in a nice art form like poetry, we could buy ourselves a nice looking, I got this nice pretty paper pad, a nice pen, and that would be it. But as filmmakers, we don't have that luxury. As filmmakers, we need more money than that. We need to be able to hire crew. We need to be able to make films. We need to get our films out into the world. I was speaking to a filmmaker today, and she was talking about the marketing budget, which is something a lot of filmmakers tend to set aside. Well, how are we going to get the film out there? We might be able to get distribution. Distribution is getting the film to the outlets, but marketing is getting it to the people who will go to the outlets to watch it. So getting our films made and getting them out into the world can be a very costly process. So filmmakers know that. So this class that I'm teaching, Fundraising 101, is really fun for me. I remembered this title a few months ago when we were kind of brainstorming titles, and this was the title I gave. Hi, Kathy. This is the title of the very, very, very first fundraising class that I ever taught. And so that was maybe 30 years ago, I guess, maybe 30 years ago that I taught my first class on fundraising. And I realized when I remembered the title, Fundraising 101, Things Your Mama Never Told You, is that even 30 years ago, I was interested in this idea that I didn't see written about in all the books. When I before I went on my own and was a fundraising consultant, and then a business and fundraising coach, I had all these books on fundraising. They were always big, thick books. They cost a fortune. And, I had all the books. I read all the books. And they never talked about the things that I felt were important. They talked about the strategies, I guess, not strategies. They talked about the nuts and bolts of fundraising. And, fundraising is a process. So let's say when you start your fundraising, maybe you have 100 people that you can ask. And then by the next year that you're fundraising, maybe you have 200 people you can ask. And maybe by the third year, you have 500 people, so there's a quality to fundraising, which is about numbers, and it's about growing numbers, and then it's about rinse and repeat. So if I have a proposal that I can get out to my first 100 people, maybe by the time I'm at 500 people, maybe it's a better proposal, but it's still the same proposal in a way, but it's going to more people. So there's this idea of numbers and trying to increase our numbers. And then there's this concept of sort of rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. So fundraising, as a fundraising expert, I find myself saying all the time, fundraising is not rocket science. I don't know if I'm supposed to say that, but anyway, fundraising is not rocket science. It is about numbers and it is about repetition. So a lot of times fundraising is about creating systems that will help you better repeat and repeat and repeat and repeat. But the things that prevent us filmmakers from raising money tend to not always only be about those systems and not to only be about those rinse and repeat methodologies. It tends to be up here and in our minds. And this is what gets in the way. I remember a few years ago, I was introduced by one of my clients to a film organization run by these two wonderful women. They were both filmmakers. And I was talking about this, and one of them just didn't get it. She was just saying, well, what do you mean? What do you mean about beliefs? What do you mean about internal belief system? You just apply for money. You just apply for it, And the other woman said, oh no, I know exactly what Joanne's talking about. The all this kind of self-esteem issues come up when we want to ask for money, and she totally understood. So I feel as though what my goal is with my clients is to get them from being the first woman who understood exactly what I was talking about to the second woman who had no emotional attachment, no internal, baggage that she carried into her fundraising. It just became a neutral thing. So I always want for my clients to get to the point where it's just neutral, that fundraising is just something that you do every day. It's not a big emotional thing. It's not incredibly draining. That's a very important piece. It's not draining. It's not exhausting. I often meet documentary filmmakers, particularly, who are just absolutely burned out with their fundraising. It's like, no, that's not the way to do it. I'll get on a Zoom call with them and they'll be like they're looking terrified, and no, this is not the way to do it. So there are strategies that we can use to help us with the internal beliefs that are getting in the way of us fundraising. And I think that is absolutely equally as important as knowing how to create the systems and how to set up your fundraising. So I have a whole bunch I'm going to try and get through tonight. We're going to go for about an hour and a half. And I have 10 points that I want to get through. And first of all, for those of you who do not know me, some of you do, some of you don't. Oh, Maria, hi, how are you doing? Maria just started her feature film that she's making. I'm going to just introduce myself first a little bit. My name is Joanne Butcher. I have been fundraising for about 30 years, I guess. I started right when I came to America, actually. I moved from London to Miami in 1984. And no, is that right? No, what am I talking about? Yes, no. Anyway, it was a hell of a long time ago. And I was doing a master's in English at the time, and I had no money. I had no money at all. My spending budget was something like $2.50 a week. It was all the money I had. So the head of the English department where I was at the University of Miami, the head of the English department would send me every single job that came in. So somebody would, you know, call up the English department. Can I get an English student to help me with this? Can I get an English student to write this? Can I, you know, and I took every single job that came in. And I took a job with this small dance company. And I was supposed to start on the Monday morning. And on the Friday, before I started my little part-time job, she called me up and she said, you know, I have a very strange ask. I was supposed to be going this weekend to Tallahassee to watch the state deliberate on our grant, and I can't go. And it was the first time she had ever applied for a grant, and she was hiring me to help with fundraising. But as I said, I wasn't starting my job until Monday. And she said, you know, would you be willing to fly up to Tallahassee, stay at my friend's house, and then go to this panel discussion for the weekend? And, you know, I was like, well, you know, I'm getting paid, so I'll go. So I flew up to Tallahassee and I watched 2 days of a panel deliberate on a grant. And I believe I learned everything I need to know about grant writing from that experience. And over the years that I've been teaching grant writing, I've told people to go and watch the deliberations on the grants. I would bet not one person has ever taken me up on that. I bet not one single person has ever done that. And yet I learned everything that I need to know about grant writing from that experience. I'm actually in Trinidad and Tobago right now, and I'm drinking my coconut water. And but I have moved back to Miami, and Miami-Dade County probably has the best cultural arts funding program in the country. Possibly New York might be better, but I'm not sure about that. But anyway, Miami is just absolutely superb. And every single grant is open to the public, and you can watch the grant process. So wherever you live, you can do that as well. It is a fantastic way to learn about grants and proposals, because all of the panelists discuss the grants, and you hear what they like, what they don't like, what they choose to fund and what they don't. It's just fantastic. Anyway, so that was how my getting into fundraising started. If you look around, there's pretty much no such thing as fundraising school. There's nowhere that you can go and study fundraising, unless you work with me, I guess. And so fundraising is not really something that's taught. Frankly, I would put fundraising in every high school. I just think it's about the best skill you can have, is learning how to raise money. But there's really nowhere to study it. You learn as a fundraiser, you learn on the job. So I would just get one job and then another job and then another job and then another job, and I was just ridiculously good at fundraising. It's like I nowadays use our language of today, and I think I have a superpower of fundraising. But I didn't go to school anywhere. I learned it on the job. And one of the things that I always like to say is people are always telling me fundraising is all about who you know. And I always say, I never knew anybody. You know, I never knew anybody. I never knew rich people. I never knew, you know, I never was connected. And I have raised millions and millions of dollars. And I believe that if you have an excellent project, you can raise money. I don't think people are interested in funding things that are not excellent, frankly. And if you know people and you show up with a shoddy project, that's not going to get funded either. You know, so I guess the best thing is to know people and to have an excellent project. But barring that, we can all have an excellent project, you know, even if we know nobody. So I just believe in, if you have an excellent project, people will want to support it. So that's been very, very fundamental to everything that I've ever done. And when I moved to San Francisco and was working for the YMCA, and we raised money for our youth program, our at-risk kids, you know, I would hang out with the kids, you know, and then I would go and raise money for the youth program. And I remember going and talking in front of the San Francisco County Commission and saying, you know, you live in San Francisco and you know that the largest street in San Francisco is called Market Street. And do you know our kids cannot cross Market Street? If they cross Market Street, they will be violating gang lines and they will be shot by gangs and it's all to do, I don't even understand the gang lines, but the kids do. The kids know where they can go, where they cannot go, where they are allowed to walk. And I raised so much money for our organization, for the YMCA, because I told a compelling story. And it wasn't necessarily one that anyone had heard before, but it was the life of our kids. That was how they lived. Can you imagine? That's how I said it. Can you imagine going to work every day and knowing you cannot cross the street because you will be murdered in America in the 20th century, in one of the most important cities of in the country? So telling a compelling story, which is central to fundraising, is just a filmmaker's greatest skill and a greatest asset. So as filmmakers, we can be really, really, really good fundraisers because we can tell stories. So I don't think that was a very good job of giving a bio. But anyway, I've been fundraising for a long time and I work with filmmakers for a long time. And so I just train filmmakers how to raise money. And my goal in life, my purpose in life, is to help filmmakers bring the money they need to get their films made, to get their messages out into the world. Because the filmmakers I meet, the filmmakers who come to me, all want to make the world a better place through our films. And right as I was getting ready to teach this class tonight, I had the news on so that I could follow the time and make sure I was on time. And the news stopped for a press conference by the police in Colorado Springs, talking about the shooting there that has killed 5 people. And it just made me think, you know, I don't speak lightly when I talk about the importance of filmmaking. You know, part of the reason that here in America we're having so much violence is because there are people out there promoting it. They promote it by speaking about it. And as filmmakers, our stories have the power to counteract that messaging. We have the power with our stories to bring light into the world, to bring truth into the world. And I believe that our ability to tell stories is truly the most powerful thing that we can do. So let's get into our fundraising 101, things your mama never told you about fundraising, things you will never find in the fundraising books. So the first one is about internal beliefs. And if you've seen my emails that I wrote in the last few days, you would have seen some of those. And so the first real barrier to being able to raise money is the beliefs we have in our own mind. And so I was just talking about, you know, I've never known any rich people, you know, that hasn't been part of my journey. Some of you maybe do, you know, which is great, which is absolutely great. But whether you do or whether you don't, eventually we're going to be asking either individuals or funders for money. We're going to be either asking them through a written proposal or we're going to be asking them verbally. Either way, we have to, first of all, be able to remove all of our negativity. And anytime that we are talking about money, it just brings up the problems in our own minds, our own beliefs, our own limited beliefs about what we can receive. And I call it, you know, our money stuff or our money shit. We all have money shit. And it's all of our negative thinking about money. I don't deserve, I can't have this, I'd never get what I want. All of those kind of beliefs all come up when we're raising money. And so what happens is then we're wandering around with all of our money shit, and then we go and we talk to somebody about giving to our film or investing in our film, and then all their money shit comes up. So now we have two people talking at each other with their money shit, and it's really not very helpful. It's not very helpful. So the first thing that we have to do is really to work on our money shit, you know. And I tell people, you know, when people start working with me, that we're going to be talking about money all the time. You know, in a way, the final taboo in our culture is to talk about money. It's easier for people to talk about sex than it is to talk about money. And it's because money, we carry all this shame, all this money shit, shame, shit, all that stuff about money. And then we project it onto other people. So the first thing, the most important thing that we can do is to clean up our money shit. So you can do that by starting to get clear about your numbers. You know, I'll often ask a new client, well, what are your bills for the month? And they don't know. You know, so how much are your bills for the month? How much do you need to make your film? Make sure that your personal finance and your film finance are completely separate. You know, a lot of filmmakers are paying out of their own pockets for their films. That's called a mess. It's called a mess, you know. So I like for my filmmakers not to spend their own money on their films, but instead to raise the money. So we need to get to a point where we can be very clean about money and clean in our conversation, in our thinking about money, so that when we go and speak to other people, even if their money shit comes up, we don't get knocked over by it. I was helping my spiritual home raise some money a couple of years ago. And the person there in charge called me up one day and she said, we were running a crowdfunding campaign, that's right, for $18,000, that's right. And she called me up one day and she said, oh, we're going to have to stop the crowdfunding campaign. And because there's been a hurricane in Puerto Rico and now everybody wants to give their money to Puerto Rico, and we can't be asking for money for our kitchen. Nobody cares about our kitchen when there's been a hurricane in Puerto Rico. And she was completely hysterical. So I listened to her talk for a while until she sort of got it all out. And she said, we've got to stop our crowdfunding campaign. And I said, no. And we went on to finish our crowdfunding campaign and raise $25,000 on our $18,000 goal. But what had happened was her own money shit had now encountered other people's money shit, and she had got knocked over. That's the way I think of it, getting knocked over when somebody says something like, well, I'm not giving any money, or that they seem annoyed, or whatever it is that people do when their money shit comes up. So in order to be able to stay centered and to stay positive, I think the most important thing about raising money, about talking to people about money, is to be positive. You know, can you imagine going and trying to get a donor to give you $100,000, or to have an investor put $100,000 in your film and go in and saying, well, you know, nobody ever wants to support my project. I don't know why right? You can't, it's like, it would be ridiculous. You wouldn't do that. We have to be extremely positive when we're raising money. So all of this is about cleaning up our internal beliefs. And we can also work on having our internal beliefs cleaned up by having our money straight, by being clear about our money. You know, maybe you need a bookkeeper, maybe you need an accountant, maybe you need to file your taxes, whatever all those things are. Maybe you're in debt, maybe, you know, all of those things, they need to get cleaned up. It's taken me a long time to get to all of that stuff in my life, and it's all clean. Fundraising, we have to be clean with our money. All right. So the second thing I want to say is, and I wrote about this in one of my emails. I can't tell you. I talk to filmmakers every day, and every time I meet a new filmmaker, at some point in the conversation, they'll say to me, well, I don't like to ask for money. And I'm like, I try and be nice. I try and be nice. Nobody likes to ask for money. Nobody likes to ask for money. Nobody comes out of their mother's womb and says, I'm going to ask for money and I'm going to enjoy it, you know? So the idea that somehow there's something special about me, that I think raising money is hard, is just, it's another belief, you know? So the fact is, as I said, there's no such thing as fundraising school. Maybe I should start one. But nobody knows how to fundraise. You know, there's no such thing as just no. You have to learn, you have to get training. You can get training from me, you're here at this class. So everybody who is here at this class, yay. Because there's not that much out there. There's not much training out there. But there's no such thing as fundraisers who are born. You need to get training to become a fundraiser. You need to learn how to raise money. And it's just not something that is innate, you know. And again, it's confusing because it's not like you know, a lot of filmmakers I meet went to film school. That's great. You know, there are places where you can go and learn filmmaking, but at film school, they're not going to teach you how to raise money either. You know, you're just supposed to know how to do that. It's ridiculous. So any training you can get it. You know, you all are on here, you get my emails. I'm always teaching something or other about fundraising. So any training you can possibly get it. And having said that, the only real training to become a fundraiser is to actually do it. And there isn't any other way around it. Like me, you also need to learn how to fundraise on the job, as it were. You need to learn how to fundraise by practicing how to fundraise. You know, so I have this saying that I say that I like my clients, they're gonna build their fundraising muscle. You know, like you go to the gym. When you go to the gym, you don't start out trying to pick up 100 pounds. You start. I had this funny experience. I had a really bad accident earlier this year, and I was going to physical therapy after the accident, and one day my chiropractor came in and he said, oh, Joanne, I want you to do this new exercise, and I'm going to give you this 2-pound weight. And I went, 2-pound weight, you know, he wants me to do this or something with this 2-pound weight. And I had actually planned to go that day to the gym. I hadn't been to the gym in a month, but I had planned to go that day to the gym and start working out and using the 5 and the 8-pound weights that I had been using before my accident. So I just kind of laughed. 2 pounds. You know, I couldn't do the exercise. I had to go down to 1 pound. I couldn't believe it. But I had damaged my shoulder so badly that I could only do this with 1 pound. I can feel it now, you know. But so building your fundraising muscle is exactly like that. So with my beginners who are making their first short film with me, I give them 2 choices. That's part of my work as a coach, to just reduce the decision making, you know, reduce all the things you have to figure out by yourself. So I give my clients who are making their first short film 2 choices. They can either raise $11,000 or $12,000. And that's where we start. So once you've had the experience of successfully raising $11,000 or $12,000, how much can you raise the next time? You know, if it's a short, how much could you raise? If it's a feature, how much could you raise? You know, there's a very, very strange, very famous English filmmaker called Ben Wheatley. And Ben Wheatley makes, he's famous for making horror films. And Ben Wheatley says, if you can raise $30,000, make a feature film. You know, and I love that. I actually say 40. But that's just because I'm fancy. I say, you know, 40,000 is the minimum that you need to make a feature film. But Ben Wheatley says 30. So, you know, hey, who am I? Ben Wheatley's famous. So, but you need to start somewhere. And so often, I'll meet a filmmaker who, and if I tell you these numbers, I'm telling you I've heard these numbers from filmmakers. I'm not making this up, but people will say, you know, oh, I'm making my first film and I want to raise $5 million. Oh, I'm making my first film, and the highest number I've been told so far is $25 million. I've never made a feature film, but I need $25 million to make it. And I'll tell you what I hear when I hear that, because I do kind of translation. I hear filmmakers talk and I translate. What that means is I'm never going to make a film. I need $25 million to make my first film. What that actually means is I'm never going to make a film. And there might be all kinds of reasons for that. I'm actually too scared to make a film. I'm too scared to make a film and find out what people really think. I'm too scared to make a film and find out if I'm any good or not. But I need $25 million to make my first film means I'm never going to make a film. That's what that means. So don't be one of those. But somewhere from 40 up, you're fine. But build your fundraising muscle, and each project that you make, you'll have more access to money. You'll be a better filmmaker, and it just keeps going like that. You build and you build and you build. So practice is really the key to fundraising. It's not something that you're going to know just like that. You need to study it. You need to learn it. You need to get training. If you can, get training. And then practice. That's the third one, Emily. Is it there? You have it? Yep. All right. Oh, I think I skipped ahead and did "you're not the only one who's afraid to ask." So I covered that one already. All right, now I'm hoping that even though you're not on video, you're going to be able to answer this question. So no, let me ask it a different way. Let me ask it a different way. All right, when you are either writing a proposal to raise money or talking to somebody, whether it's a donor or whether it's an investor, it's all the same thing. The most important message that you need to be able to convey is your log line. Does anybody know what a log line is? I'm assuming everybody knows what a log line is, but does anybody know what a log line is? Maria, I know you know what a log line is. Everybody's off video, so I'm not sure what's happening, but I would like to hear, we've got a very small group tonight. I would love to hear everybody's log lines. So this is now going to be a challenge for everybody. What is your log line? Please come on video and share your log line with us. I talked to a filmmaker today who wants to raise $1 million to make her film, and she couldn't tell me her log line. So that's not going to go well. So let's hear some log lines. Who wants to share their log line? Maybe nobody's here. Maybe nobody's here. Kramina, do you want to share your log line? Bye, Kathy.
Hi.
Hi. You're the only one brave enough to be on video, so I'm going to go with you.
Yeah. Let me remember it. After losing his job in the tribal government, a single father creates an event to bring the community together around their livelihood with Mustangs in a bid to fulfill a duty that's been passed from a generation to generation.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Kramina, for being the first one to jump in. And how do you feel about your log line now? Do you feel as if it's clear?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's specific. There are everything is specific, in I feel. So
yes.
yeah.
What do you think? Can you say it again for us?
Okay, after losing his job.
By the way, it's very hard when you only hear a log line and you don't hear anything around the log line. But Kramina's documentary is about raising Mustangs. So it's hard to hear when it's kind of out of context and there's no lead in and anything like that. But Kramina's, just so everybody knows, Kramina's film is about training Mustangs in Texas, right? So let's hear the log line again.
Okay. So after losing his job in the tribal government, a single father creates an event to bring the community together around their livelihood with Mustangs in a bid to fulfill a duty that's been passed from a generation to generation.
Lovely. Okay. And I think it's just from generation to generation, not from a generation to generation. Yes, okay, from generation to generation. That's fine. But anyway, it's really good. It's a documentary, but it has this feeling, it has the sound of being a full-on story about man, his family, his livelihood, this whole legacy idea. It's there's a lot going on in that log line. That is great. That is an awesome log line. That is awesome. All right. And so, and also just being able to say, here's my log line. It's like when I spoke to this filmmaker today, and she's like, oh, let me look for it. And oh, I can, it's somewhere here. And I'll find it. You know, that is so common that I hear from filmmakers. Do not be that filmmaker. Okay, Laurie G, let's hear your log line. Oh, I can't wait.
Well, since we haven't talked yet, we haven't decided which project to key in on. That's but right. This is an expensive log line I paid for, so I'm gonna so, the expensive budget film, but it's a film called The Spoiler. It's an action adventure comedy with elements of fantasy and romance, in a unique take on time travel genre that puts the author in a position of having to survive her own fiction. And then he had the whole comparing thing. It's like an 18th century Back to the Future. Yeah, you didn't like that, right? So yeah.
But can you just give it to us again?
Yeah, it's The Spoiler. It's an action adventure comedy with elements of romance and fantasy. And I always forget this part. And a unique take on time travel genre that puts an author in the position of having to survive her own fiction.
I think that there's a seed in there that's really nice. This idea of the author trying to survive her own fiction. It's funny, I have a client who made a film called Animator, and the animator drew the future. And she did a beautiful job with that film. It's called Animator. You'll find it on TV. It's not The Animator, it's Animator. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Roberta,
I'll look it up. That's cool. I like that storyline.
And it's amazing. So I think what I heard in your log line is the seed of a log line.
I agree.
You know? And it's kind of that, you know, when you're saying all these things, you're saying, oh, it's this genre, and then it's got elements of romance and fantasy. All of that is just kind of like,
yeah, it's vague.
The log line is really not only the story, but it's also selling us the story. You know, that's my favorite class that I teach is called Writing a Log Line That Sells. You know, so it's because I'm thinking about it from fundraising. I'm not thinking about it like, oh, does this sound like a good story? I'm like, oh, do you want to put money in my film? Kind of log line. Right? That's the log line you want. Do you want to put money in my film? And you know, so thank you. That was good. I think we can go a lot further with it. An author is very abstract, you know, and then fiction. So I love the concept, but I think we can take it a lot further. Great. Who else wants to try? Amber, oh no, Mo, you were on video for a minute. Was it Amber or was it Mo? Who else is going to try their log line? Amber.
Hi, I can, mine is in the chat if you want to look at it.
Oh, Mo, okay. Amber, you go ahead. You go ahead with yours.
Okay, I'm just here to hopefully get some ideas for a friend who has a project. So I don't personally have a project, so I'm really enjoying listening to everybody's log lines. But I don't have her log line with me. Sorry.
Okay. Thank you, Amber, for coming on video. It makes me so happy. Mo, do you want to read us your log line? And Amber, how kind of you to come and learn on behalf of a friend. That's really nice. Mo, were you able to unmute and read us your log line? Oh, she's on a train. Okay.
Hi, I'm on a train, so it's too noisy, but I did put it in the chat if you want to
It
read
doesn't
it.
sound noisy at all.
Well, the
You-
train has stopped for a minute. I
Oh.
think it's gonna get noisy again.
Gonna get
Yeah.
noisy. Okay, I will read it. Is the title Undocumented Justice?
Yes.
Yes, okay. When ICE threatens 700,000 fellow dreamers, Luis Cortez Romero fights back and becomes the first undocumented attorney to argue a case at the US Supreme Court. A charismatic immigration attorney and DACA recipient, Luis risks his own safety to join a powerful and highly visible legal team. Their stunning Supreme Court win fortifies a growing, vigorous, and urgent campaign for compassionate immigration reform with a pathway to citizenship. Very exciting. You sent me a trailer for this, I believe. Well, she's on a train. So yeah, because I can see Luis in my head. I just saw this trailer. So what I would say about that is that in a story that's something like this, it's a very complex political issue, is that I would go for what Cremona was able to achieve in her logline, which is instead of it's not so bad when it's in writing, but when you hear it, you hear how complex it is. There are so many Latin words, Latin-based words. English, the language of English, is made up of a combination of both Romance and languages, French, Latin, Spanish, think of those languages, and Anglo-Saxon. And Anglo-Saxon tends to be much more short and to the point, but Latin tends to go around. If you ever learn how to speak Spanish, they'll say their sentence there'll be 3 to 5 sentences for every one of ours, you know. So in a log line, I always think it's really good to avoid Latinate words. You know, so charismatic, immigration, recipient, these are all Latin words. They always have lots of syllables and they're very hard to hear. And for me, a log line you need to be able to hear it, because in the end, you're going to be talking to people about money. You know, it's not always going to be written down. So I would go with a much shorter and much more compelling kind of narrative with this, which really comes up at the end, you know. So I would say something, it could be something even like, in a stunning Supreme Court victory, Luis Cortez Romero becomes the first undocumented attorney to argue a case to fight for DACA recipients, or to fight, but something much shorter, much more Anglo-Saxon, or I like to also call it 7-year-old language. You know, once we start using really kind of intellectually complex terms, people can't hear it anymore. If you want to write a log line that really sells your films, if a 7-year-old can hear it, you're doing well. Who else would like to? Javier, are you up for, or Carlton?
Yes, I'm here. I was just about to turn on, so hi.
On video, yay!
Yeah, okay.
Much more fun when everybody's on video. Why have
Right,
you
so,
got Lugan on your shirt?
oh, it's a VW shirt. So go ahead.
Go ahead. Give us your log line. This is fun.
Our log line is: when she continues to be rejected from med school, a first-generation Haitian American challenges her mother's dreams and expectations for her life by becoming a makeup artist.
Oh, that was good. I think there's something not quite right grammatically though with it. Can you do it again?
When she continued, I probably there is because I just did
No,
that.
no. It's a
Um,
very common thing that happens in a log line. So when a da, right? Go ahead.
When she continues to be rejected from med school, a first-generation Haitian American challenges her mother's dreams and expectations for her life by becoming a makeup artist.
It's very good, and it's also somehow very hard to hear, and it's to do with we take the. I used to teach English composition, and I never remembered any of it. You know, I came to America, and they had me teaching English composition. I'm like reading the books before class because we never got taught any of that stuff in England. You know, we never got taught about dangling participles. I think there's a participle at the beginning, right? When something gets rejected from med school. Okay. First generation Haitian American immigrant, Haitian American. That's very good. So it wasn't the grammar error I was thinking. That's already enough complexity for us to listen to. Then you introduce the mother and it's too much.
Okay.
So when you're working on your log lines, speak them out loud, get people to listen to them, and you watch for their reactions. And so when they go, when they go, you know that you didn't get there, right? So it's everything about it is good. It's just too hard to hear. And it's because we're following along with her story, and then we switch to the mother, and the mother almost becomes the subject of the sentence, and we can't handle it. So you can fix that, you know, but it's very nice. And I just can't imagine what's going to happen in this story when mom, Haitian American mom, finds out her daughter is going to med school. I mean, all hell is going to break loose, right? That's one of my shorthands for when, you know, big crises in a movie. All hell breaks loose, you know. That's another thing you could use in your log line. You know,
okay.
after multiple rejections from med school, a first generation immigration, first generation Haitian American admits to her mom she wants to become a makeup artist, and all hell breaks loose. I'm partly just joking, but that's really what it is, right?
Yeah.
She's going to, because the moment she tells her mom she's going to become a makeup artist, right? There's going to be trouble.
Yeah.
But we're with her because she's been rejected from med school, you know, which is obviously what her mom wants her to do. Thank you so much for being brave and coming on. Nice to meet you. Anybody else? We'll take one more log line. Who can I pick on? Holly.
Hi.
Yay! What's your log line?
Sure. Using history to illuminate the present, the Rainbow Nation explores drag as political expression, revealing South Africa's drag performers as integral political actors and activists, whose distinctly queer showmanship and radical self-acceptance helped create the new South Africa, the modern Rainbow Nation.
Ooh, that's very powerful, very powerful. I think there's too much in there. And again, it's too kind of intellectual, you know? So I would bring it to 7-year-old language, and it'll be great. And that's a fabulous ending. The new South Africa, the Rainbow Nation. That is fantastic.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, that really is very, very powerful. Well, who else? Carlton, do you want to have a go? I said only one more, but Carlton, you want to try? No. Okay. All right. We can move on. So the log line, I mean, I just shared a whole bunch of stuff about log lines, and I can go on about log lines literally for hours. It's my favorite class that I teach. But if you can get to a log line that people can really hear, I would say that is the #1 skill for a 21st century producer to have. Because when you are raising money, unless you are sitting at a computer writing grants and nothing else and never speaking to another human being, which I would not recommend as a fundraising strategy. But if you're like Laurie and you're looking for investors, you've got to talk to people. But if you're in documentary as well, you're going to need to raise money from major donors. The majority of the money out there is from donors. So having a log line that people can really hear. I work on this with my clients a lot, and they suffer, but get really, really good. I tell my clients enter every pitch competition you can, because you're going to win. Because when you get to the point where you can really deliver that log line so people can hear it and get excited about your film, and it's not kind of buried in language that's too difficult for people to hear. They have to be able to read it and read it. No, you've got to be able to deliver a log line so that people can hear it. So that is something to work on. And I hope you got something out of all of that. So now we're gonna, I'm going to wave my magic wand. Everybody now has a fabulous log line. And then the next thing that you need is a fabulous synopsis. So this is just a little bit further than a log line, a little bit more expansive than a log line, but no more than, say, a paragraph, But again, you want to be able to communicate in a very short way about your film. I don't have anything brilliant to say about a synopsis, but again, it should just be brief. And you'll see that anytime that you're writing a grant, anytime you are, you have a pitch deck, anytime you enter a competition, you're always going to need that log line, a synopsis, and they need to be absolutely stellar. And I don't mean stellar in it has to be the best movie in the world, or of course all your movies, the best movies in the world, but it has to be, it has to sell your film. And I have a number of clients right now, all preparing the December, for the December deadline for ITVS. ITVS is the commissioning arm for PBS. And I used to be a reader for ITVS. And back in the old days, it wasn't all online. And I used to get delivered to my house a big box of proposals, like this. And my job was to read the proposals and score them and then ship them back. And then the grants that you get awarded at ITVS for post-production is like $350,000. So it's a significant amount of money. But what filmmakers don't realize is that, I as a reader, I was paid to read the proposals. And I did my job. I read the whole proposal. I read everything. I scored everything and so on. But the truth is, your grant, your application, your competition, your thing, whatever it is dead if you don't have a good log line and a good synopsis. There is no way that you're going to make it through to the next round or whatever the thing is if you don't have those things down. So in the documentary world, it's very typical to have a log line, a synopsis, and a teaser, a piece of work that shows something of your film. I have a client right now, and she's not going to be shooting until after she's raised the money. So she's going to be shooting in March. but she went the other day to an event. She took her iPhone, she shot some footage so that she can apply to places and have something to show. And it's just going to be, 3 little scenes with, a title for each scene. Nothing fancy, but something to show people what it is that she's working on. So in the grant writing world, that is your basic things that you need for an application: a log line, a synopsis, and something to show. Now, in the fiction world, you can do the same thing. I've never been very much into what's called a proof of concept in the fiction world, but the truth is it really can work, and you don't necessarily have to spend a fortune on it. Same kind of idea, but if you're trying to raise money for a fiction film, then it could be useful to have something to show. I had a client who did it about a year ago, and I didn't like what she did at all. She used found footage. That's not the right term, but anyway, she used footage from other films to show in a sort of teaser thing what she was going to do. I didn't like it at all. But she raised her money, and I don't think she ever used it to raise her money. So, but people who are making multi-million-dollar films and can't really, show what their film is going to be until they've raised the money, sometimes it's worth making a proof of concept and spending some money on getting that made. It's not my favorite, but it's a strategy that has definitely worked for some people. So logline synopsis and some kind of teaser. All right, so the next one is to set your fundraising goals. It's so funny. I have a client. I'm going to be speaking to him tomorrow. Oh, he's going to be in so much trouble. No, Javier, no, I would not. He's going to be in so much trouble, and we have a thing that we work on where we set the goals. He's got 2 films he's working on, and we set a goal of, I think it was $65,000 for the one film, and then about $150 for the other film. And the one film became more urgent than the other film, so the $65,000. So I set up a spreadsheet, and I guesstimated, like back of the envelope kind of guesstimating, well, for this $65,000, where's it going to come from? Is it going to come from small donors, which in the film world, we tend to use crowdfunding campaigns these days to get small donors. It's not the only way, but it's the most common way to get small donors. So how much are we going to raise from small donors? How much are we going to raise from major donors? How much are we going to raise from grants? How much are we going to raise from foundations? And then I broke out, well, how much are we going to raise in 2022? And how much are we going to raise in 2023? And then go through the same exercise. And we started on this in maybe September, I think. And he's raised more than the $65,000, but before the end of 2022. So it was really nice because, we had written down these goals, how much we were going to raise in 2022, how much we were going to raise in 2023, and we actually raised everything in 2022. So in 2023, he can go back to film number 2, where he's raising the $150,000. So, but it's really great to set those goals. And I don't know how this works, but any of you who've ever done work around goal setting and things like that, that's another class I love to teach, is goal setting. But it's really, really, what's the word? Gratifying to have sat down in September and said, we we're setting this goal to raise the $65,000. This is how we're going to raise it. And it didn't quite come in exactly the way that we said it was going to. I think we got a smaller grant, but more from a foundation, you know, that kind of thing. But to see everything that we laid out has come in, you know, faster than we thought. Yes, but it's come in pretty much in the pattern and the structure that, you know, we laid out. And as I said, it was just sort of guesstimating. He's done fundraising before, so the more fundraising you've done, the easier it is to guess. You know, when you've done zero fundraising, it's harder to guess. But when you start, you know, once this becomes a regular thing, you know, well, you know, I probably can get so much from major donors, and I can probably go back to this foundation. I can probably go back to that grant and that kind of thing. So set your fundraising goals. And if you have never fundraised before, then, as I said, with my clients, I start my beginner short filmmakers at $11,000 or $12,000. And all of them make it. They have me, admittedly, but you know, I think in today's world, bringing in $6,000, $7,000, $10,000. I have a little class that's, you can get it on my website, called Demystifying Crowdfunding, and the idea is you do that little class and you make $10,000 crowdfunding. So if you've never fundraised before, then at least that would be a place to start. Raise $10,000 with your crowdfunding. Now, with my clients who are making feature films, I don't necessarily try and raise all the money from a crowdfunding campaign. Recently, I got an email from somebody, and I think she should know better because she's on my email list. But I guess if she's on my email list, doesn't mean to say she reads my emails. I'm on people's email lists and I don't read their emails. So anyway, so she wrote to me and she said, will you support my crowdfunding campaign? Not a good email, but that's another class. Will you support my crowdfunding campaign? I didn't know who she was. I didn't know what the film was. I didn't know anything about her. But I clicked on it and I looked at her crowdfunding campaign and it said, I'm making my first feature film and I'm raising $500,000 on crowdfunding. And I was like, oh my God. So I probably shouldn't have said anything, but I wrote to her and I said, thank you for sharing, but this isn't going to work. And by the way, it said the goal was $500,000 and there was $50 in it. It was like day 6 of the campaign. I see Laurie's face just go. Now, I don't know how to explain this, but everybody knows that's not going to work. You don't have to be a filmmaker. You don't have to be a fundraising expert. You don't have to be any of those things, but everybody knows it's not going to work. So I wrote to her and I said, this isn't going to work. And she wrote back and she said, how do you know? And I didn't ever write back because how do you know? How is it that we all know that that's not going to work? But we do. And not only do we know as filmmakers, everybody knows. And I can't even explain it, but everybody knows that's not going to work. And it was just too complicated for me to know how to answer that. So I didn't even write back to the poor woman. I did check again a few weeks later and it was still at $50. So don't do that. But, you know, if you're making, like in this case of the filmmaker I was just talking about, with that 150 that he's going to be raising next year for that film, next year we'll do a crowdfunding campaign. It'll only be for maybe $20,000, $25,000. But when you are making a film over multiple years and have multiple projects, then $25,000 is great as part of a fundraising plan, as part of a fundraising strategy. Trying to raise everything through crowdfunding, I don't believe in at all. And a lot of times, you know, when I'm working with my clients, a lot of times they'll think, oh, you know, I want to raise $50,000, I want to raise $100,000, I want to raise $200,000 to make my film. Let's do it with crowdfunding. And I don't recommend that at all. I think that there needs to be a strategy where there are different ways of fundraising, and crowdfunding can fit nicely into a bigger strategy. You know, crowdfunding, the other day I was teaching a group of documentary filmmakers. They all looked frightened and haggard, and it's terrible. It's terrible. Documentary filmmakers get themselves into some knots about raising money. But you know, somebody said, well, how do we find donors? And I brought up crowdfunding, and they were like, well, what if we don't want to do crowdfunding? And so thing is, when you're starting and you have no list and you have no donors, how are you going to start? And, you know, in the past, we did all kinds of things. We did raffles, we did bake sales, we did this, we did that. Today, crowdfunding gives us access in a much easier way to find people online. And then we can start from there, leveraging those names and finding who our major donors are. I mean, I had some really young women. They were making their first short film with me, but it was an animated short. That's why, Javier, I'm like, no, you do not want to make an animated proof of concept. It's way too time-consuming and expensive to make animation. But anyway, so they were raising $25,000. They've never raised any money before, never made a movie before, super young. And I think we raised $20,000 with the crowdfunding, and then they leveraged two of the donors to $2,500 donations each, and they got their $25,000, right? So it's a great way to just start. Good job, Javier. You're the producer, you tell them. So it's a good way to start, because you want to build your list. You need to build a list. So my next topic is, and this is the last two, I have two more. The next topic is major donors and investors. So let me just talk about investors for a minute. So if you are prepared with that fantastic log line that people can hear, and you're prepared with your excellent synopsis, maybe you have a proof of concept, maybe you don't. But the other things that you're going to need to be able to speak to investors are a pitch deck. And the most important thing about this pitch deck is it's going to be about business. And I see pitch decks all the time. I even have a little collection of them, because my clients will say, oh, I found this beautiful pitch deck. And I'll look at it and I'll say, but there's no business on it. There's no business. And so what it is that firstly, it's very hard to get hold of pitch decks. When you do get hold of a pitch deck, it's actually what is referred to as a lookbook. It's going to have pictures of the characters. It's got the characters, and it's got, you know, a mood board, and it's got images of, you know, the locations of where it's got all this stuff about the filmmaking and nothing about business. I met somebody on Clubhouse the other day who's now started a pitch deck business. You can go and pay him to make you a pitch deck that says nothing about business on it. It's amazing. It's just very, very sad. So for investors, I prefer the idea of a pitch deck than a proof of concept, because it's cheaper, easier to make, and a proof of concept is still back to kind of the filmmaking, you know, whereas a pitch deck can really be about the business, and it can be about how much is this film going to make, which is what an investor wants to know. They want to know, how much is this film going to make? They don't want to know who's in it, where it's going to be shot, what the costumes are going to look like. They want to know, how much is it going to make? And so to me, the best way of communicating that is in a pitch deck. And, you know, you might go further with other financials and so on, but still in a shorthand way to be able to show that in a pitch deck is really what investors want to see. Investors want to know one thing: how much money am I going to make? That's what they want to know. How much money am I going to make? So I need to be able to say clearly, this is my film, this is my log line, and then this is how much money it's going to make. That's what I need to be able to communicate to investors. And the final thing I wanted to talk about is grants. So for fiction filmmakers, grants are not like the first thing that fiction filmmakers think about. And there are lots of them available. You know, if you're a woman, there are lots of grants available. If you're Black, there are lots of grants available. If you're a person of color, if you're LGBT, there's lots of different programs and so on, trying to get money into the hands of filmmakers from underserved communities so that their stories can get out. You know, so that's great, and those things are available to you. Pretty much everybody on this call would benefit from that. But if you're a documentary filmmaker, documentary filmmakers have the opposite problem, where they think that that grants are the only way of raising money. And so for documentary filmmakers, I find that I'm always having to open their minds about all the other ways of raising money, you know, that it isn't only documentary film grants that are available to them. And so about a year ago, I was hired by a really great documentary filmmaker organization for women that I'm a part of, for women of color that I'm a part of. And and in this group, we were consulting with 5 different filmmakers. Each one had already raised $100,000, which is, you know, that's a significant chunk of change. Every single one of them had raised all of that money in grants. And so, you know, I'm doing my consulting thing with the first filmmaker. And I said, well, what about major donors? And they would look at me like, what? You know, and so I get to the second one that I'm consulting with, and I said, well, what about major donors? And they were like, what? And by the time I got to like number 4 or number 5, I realized I was sounding like a stuck record. It was the same thing every single time. I'm like, you've raised $100,000 in grants and you haven't raised anything from individuals. Do you know where more than 90% of all of the charitable giving comes from every year? Comes from individuals. So if you have been able to go out there and land yourself a grant, I have a client right now who got a $100,000 grant from Vision Makers, which is an organization that funds Native American film projects. And so the job of the filmmaker is to take that, what I think of as that stamp of approval, you know, or we got a grant from Vision Makers, which is this very important organization, and now take that to my major donors to show them, well, you don't have to vet us anymore. We've been vetted, right? We've received our stamp of approval. We've received that, you know, we've been in competition with all these other projects and we won. You know, we got the grant, and then to leverage that into at least another $100,000. If I raise $100,000 in grants, I'm going to raise at least $100,000 or $200,000 from major donors as a. I mean, you could even think of it as a match, but it's just that. It's just that the way to think about it is that individuals are the people who do the majority of all giving in the country, in the world, you know, everywhere. So if I can raise $100,000 in grants, I must be able to raise at least that, if not more, from individuals. So that's how I see grants. And major donors, Mo, is for major donors, really in traditional fundraising, there are several terms for how you work with major donors. So there's all these different stages. So there's the acquisition of the major donors, and that's when I was saying earlier, well, if you don't know anybody, you could at least start with crowdfunding. That was the way you can get to know some people, you know, and then to turn some of those into major donors. My mentor, Mario Warshawski, wrote a fabulous book called House Parties, which is really about fundraising for major donors at events at people's houses. So you can have screenings and collect people's emails. I mean, there are just all kinds of ways to start growing your list of donors. And then in traditional fundraising, the way that you think about your donors is, think of it like a pyramid. So at the bottom of the pyramid, maybe you have all your people who've given you $25, $50. You know, in crowdfunding, the most common gift is $75 or $100, right? And then as you go up the pyramid, maybe the next level is $100. Maybe the next level is $500. The next level is 1,000, and you keep going till you get to the top. And maybe it's, you know, I have clients who have $25,000 donors, you know. So, but the way that you treat a $25,000 donor is very different than the way that you treat a $100 donor, you know. So a $25,000 donor, in order to maintain that, you know, my client gets $25,000 gifts every year. But in order to maintain that relationship, when working with major donors, it's going to be much more one-on-one. It's going to be phone calls. It's going to be lunch. It's going to be coffee. It's going to be getting together at an event or something like that. So that's called stewardship. And stewardship is about the multi-year relationship with a major donor. One of my clients recently got a $10,000 gift from a donor, and he went to visit him in hospice and helped fix his computer so he could be in touch with people. But that's kind of the kind of stewardship that a major donor is the kind of thing that you do with a major donor. It's much more to do with having a relationship. Or anything to do with donors is all about relationships, you know, whether it's a $25 donor or a $25,000 donor, it's all about relationships. So your job as a filmmaker is to keep growing that list, to keep building that list, keep having more and more people, whether they're donors or whether they're investors. And the way that you treat them, the way that you thank them, the way you communicate with them is very, very similar between donors and investors. You treat them like you're very good friends, which is what they are. That's really what they are, you know, and what they become. So I hope that was helpful. So, all right, I got through all my 10 things I wanted to talk about. So we are, oh, thank you, Emily. Yes. So yeah, does anybody have any questions in our last few minutes? Everybody's been so quiet. Laurie D, did you have a question? No.
I was thinking I did, but it's Demystifying Crowdfunding is on your site. I'll watch that or listen to it. So that's good. And then the book House Party, is that something you recommend to watch? I mean, by
You not so much, because it's really it's really, well, no, I think maybe for you, yeah. So it's called House Parties, and it's by Murray Warshawski. I'm going to write his name because it's very complicated. Murray
good.
Warshawski. His other book is called Shaking the Money Tree, and that's really the fundraising Bible for documentary filmmakers.
Okay.
The House Parties is about setting up events, and they're the only special events I approve of. I'm totally burned out on events. I've done hundreds of events in my life. I don't do them anymore. The only event I recommend is House Parties. And I have to remember that some people are not burned out on events, and some people like events. But this year I had a client who, against my better judgment, went ahead and did an event and lost her shirt. That's the problem with special events, is that people spend a whole bunch of money and don't make any money. And I'm not into that. So a house party doesn't cost you any money, and you can raise money. That's my kind of event. You know, you get your wealthy friend who has a beautiful home to do an event at their house, and they invite their friends, and they even probably pay for the cheese and wine. And you show up in your frock, and you maybe show a little of your film if you have that. You make a presentation and you ask for money. That's my kind of event. Didn't cost any money to produce. Everybody has a lovely time. Everybody eats their cheese and wine, and they write you checks or give you money in some other way. That's my kind of event. So that's a house party, and Murray Warshawski wrote that book. So that's also a great donor acquisition method, because because your friend invites their friends to the house party. They're not your people, they're their people. So that's a great donor acquisition or investor acquisition strategy. That's really, really good. Any more questions? You know, very good, Javier. This is the thing. I mean, special events can be so labor intensive, but people will just spend all kinds of money. And I'm just like, no, we're supposed to be raising money. We're not supposed to be spending money. I do believe that you have to spend money to make money. I mean, I think that's true, but oh my God, the money that is spent on special events that don't make money drives me insane. So thank you everybody for coming and behaving so nicely. And learning about fundraising. It's just, you know, there's much more sexy things you could be studying and taking your time doing, learning how to write scripts and how to make movies and how to direct, and all of that stuff is so much more sexy than raising money. But I think it's the most important thing. You know, I am convinced it's the most important thing. The more money we can raise, the better professionals we can hire to make our films. You know, none of us are going to be making our films by ourselves. We need to hire other people to, you know, do the sound, I have a client right now who's going through, he's hired a sound person, hired a makeup person, he's negotiating with the DP. He's always hiring all these people. And the more money you have, the better people you can hire, the better people you can pay. So I'm all about, where's the money? Where's the money? How are we going to make this film? And you don't even have to know how to make a film. If you can raise the money, you can hire the people who do know how to make a film, you know? So Amber, you can make a film too. It doesn't have to just be your friend. So thank you very much for coming. If you would like to talk to me about working with me to help, I'm a business coach, but I teach fundraising. I'm basically like film business school. And I work with filmmakers to ensure that their films get distribution. And then once we know they have distribution, then raising the money makes more sense. You know, if you know that your film is actually going to get out there and it's not like, oh, I'm going to go and send it to some film festivals and maybe something might happen. No, that's not how we work. We know we have distribution. We start with distribution and then we raise the money to get to that end point. We start with the end in mind, as Stephen Covey would say in 7 Habits for Highly Effective People. So if you would like to talk to me, please book some time on my calendar and we'll talk about raising money and getting your films made, getting your films distributed. And I would love to talk to you. I would love to find out more about your films and your projects. So thank you all for coming, and go and have a wonderful Monday, and go World Cup. Oh, you're all Americans. You don't care.
Oh, you're watching the World Cup too?
I'm in Trinidad. I'm watching the World Cup. Of course I am. You know, Trinidad was the smallest country ever to get into the World Cup. But we're not there this year, so. And we beat the US to get in. Somebody reminded me today, so not bad. Good night, everybody. I look forward to talking to you about your films. And I look forward to hearing about all the money you're raising. Yay. Hi, Asia. Talk to you tomorrow, I think. All right. Bye.